You ever notice how divorce seems to follow a pattern? Not the legal stuff, not the paperwork or the custody arrangements. I'm talking about what happens after the transformation that almost every divorced woman goes through, especially after a long marriage ends. And here's what's strange: nobody really talks about it, honestly. We see the Instagram posts, the living my best life captions, the girls' trips and the wine nights, and the declarations of independence. And on the surface, everything looks perfect. But if you've been through it, if you've watched it happen to someone close to you, you know there's another story underneath. A pattern that repeats itself so consistently, it's almost eerie. Tonight, we're going behind the curtain. We're exploring the psychological journey that unfolds when a woman leaves a long term marriage, the stages she goes through, the mindset shifts, the unexpected challenges that nobody prepares her for. This isn't about taking sides. This isn't about blame. This is about understanding what really happens when someone dismantles the life they built and tries to construct something new from the rubble. Because the truth is, what looks like freedom from the outside often feels completely different from the inside. And the pattern, once you see it, becomes impossible to ignore. Let's dive in. Picture this: you're sitting in what used to be your shared home, now divided. The furniture is different, half the photos are gone, the routines you followed for years, the morning coffee ritual, the evening conversations, the predictable rhythm of shared life, all of it has evaporated overnight. For her, that first week feels surreal. There's relief mixed with terror, freedom tangled with regret. The bed feels too big, the silence too loud. Every familiar space now carries the ghost of what used to be there. But here's where it gets interesting: mind doesn't process loss in a straight line. It doesn't move neatly from sadness to acceptance. Instead, it searches desperately for a narrative that makes sense. And the narrative that usually wins, at least initially, is empowerment. She starts telling herself a story. This was necessary, this was brave, this was her reclaiming her life. And you know what? Maybe it's true. Maybe the marriage was broken beyond repair. But the story she tells herself in those early days isn't really about truth. It's about survival. It's about creating a framework that allows her to move forward without collapsing under the weight of uncertainty. Friends rally around her. They reinforce the narrative: you deserve better, you're so strong, look at you starting over. The validation feels incredible because it drowns out the doubt. It silences the voice that whispers late at night, asking if she made the right choice. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, she begins to believe the story completely. This is where things get fascinating. Phase one is what I call the euphoria stage, and it's intoxicating. She wakes up one morning and realizes something profound. She can do whatever she wants. There's no one to answer to, no compromises to make, no routines dictated by someone else's schedule. The freedom is dizzying. She starts small. Maybe she redecorates, changes the paint color he never liked, buys furniture that reflects her taste alone. She joins a gym or starts taking classes she always talked about but never pursued. Pottery, dance, kickboxing, whatever it is, it represents possibility. Her social life explodes. Suddenly, she's getting invitations she hasn't received in years. Friends want to take her out, introduce her to new people, show her the life she's been missing. Every weekend is packed, every evening has potential. The calendar that used to revolve around family dinners and couple obligations now belongs entirely to her. And then there's the attention. This is the part nobody really prepares for. After years of being seen primarily as someone's wife, she's suddenly visible again as an individual. Men notice her, compliments come easily. The dating apps light up with matches and messages. It's overwhelming and validating and addictive all at once. She posts photos that get more likes than anything she's shared in years. The comments pour in: you look amazing, living your best life. He doesn't know what he's missing. Each notification is a small hit of dopamine, reinforcing the belief that she's not just surviving, she's thriving. In this phase, everything feels possible. She genuinely believes she's discovered a version of herself that was suppressed for years. The excitement is real. The confidence is real. The sense of liberation is absolutely real. But here's the thing about euphoria, it's chemically similar to mania. The brain is flooding with feel good chemicals, novelty seeking hormones. The biological response to dramatic life change. It feels like enlightenment, but it's actually just neurochemistry doing its thing. And like any high, it's temporary. Let's talk about validation for a moment because this is where phase one starts to reveal its cracks. Human beings are wired to seek external affirmation. It's not a weakness, it's biology. We're social creatures who evolved in groups where acceptance literally meant survival. In a long-term marriage, validation becomes routine. It's in the small gestures, the inside jokes, the way your partner knows how you take your coffee. It's not dramatic, but it's constant. It's a baseline of being known and accepted. When that disappears, the need for validation doesn't vanish. It intensifies. And suddenly she's getting it from everywhere, from friends, from strangers, from social media algorithms designed to reward engagement. The problem is that this kind of validation is fundamentally different. It's broad but shallow. It's enthusiastic but impersonal. A 100 likes from acquaintances doesn't replace the deep knowing of being truly seen by one person. But in phase one, the volume drowns out the difference. Quantity feels like quality. She starts making decisions based on what generates the most positive response, the outfit that gets compliments, the story that gets reactions, the lifestyle choice that earns praise. Without realizing it, she's trading one form of external validation for another, except this new version is more fragile because it requires constant performance. The exhaustion hasn't set in yet, but the foundation is being laid. Then, usually somewhere between 6 months and a year, something shifts. Phase two arrives quietly, like a fog rolling in. The excitement that felt endless starts to level off. The novelty wears thin. The routine she created to replace the old, ones begin to feel just as routine. This is the plateau stage, and it's disorienting. The dates that seemed thrilling now feel repetitive. She's heard the same opening lines, answered the same questions about her divorce, smiled through the same shallow conversations dozens of times. Modern dating, with its endless options and swipe-based efficiency, starts to reveal its fundamental emptiness. The attention that once felt validating now feels hollow. She realizes that being wanted isn't the same as being valued. That attraction isn't the same as connection. The men who pursue her are often interested in the idea of her. The newly single woman, the conquest, not the actual complex human being she is. Her social calendar, once bursting with activity, starts to feel more like obligation than excitement. The girls' nights follow the same script. The conversations loop. Everyone's supportive, but nobody really understands what she's going through because they're not going through it themselves. And here's where the comparisons begin. She doesn't mean to do it. She might not even be conscious of it at first, but her mind starts measuring her current experiences against her past. Not the bad parts of her marriage, the fights or the frustrations, but the good parts, the comfort, the familiarity, the ease of being with someone who knew her history, her quirks, her family dynamics. She remembers how her ex-husband knew exactly how to make her laugh when she was stressed, how he handled certain situations, how they had their own language built over years of shared experience. And she realizes that rebuilding that kind of depth takes time. Maybe more time than she has patience for. The men she's meeting are strangers. They don't know her stories. They don't understand her references. Every interaction requires explanation, context, the exhausting work of being known from scratch. This is when the first real doubts creep in. Here's something fascinating that happens in phase two, an identity crisis that nobody warned her about. For years, maybe decades, a significant part of her identity was tied to being a wife, being part of a unit, making decisions as half of a partnership. Even if she wanted out of the marriage, even if it was the right choice, that role shaped how she saw herself. And now it's gone. She's not a wife anymore. She's not part of a couple. She's just herself. And the question becomes, who exactly is that? The freedom that felt liberating now feels untethered. There's no one to check in with. which sounds great until she realizes there's also no one who cares where she is, no one waiting for her to come home, no one whose day is affected by her presence or absence. She has complete autonomy, but autonomy without connection starts to feel like isolation. This is when she might throw herself into self improvement. Not the fun kind from phase one, but the desperate kind. She reads self help books, starts therapy, tries meditation or journaling or whatever promises to help her find herself, because the uncomfortable truth is that she's not sure who she is outside of the roles she's played. The social media posts continue, but they require more effort now. The captions become more philosophical, more about growth and journey. She's performing authenticity, trying to convince herself as much as her audience that everything is going according to plan. But late at night, when the distractions fade, the questions come. Did I make the right choice? Is this really better? What am I actually looking for? Phase 3 is where things get real. This is the reckoning stage, and it typically hits somewhere between 1 and 2 years post-divorce. This is when the full weight of her decision becomes undeniable. The initial support from friends has faded. People have moved on with their own lives. The novelty of her situation has worn off. She's expected to have figured things out by now, to be thriving, to have moved on. But the reality is far more complicated. The dating scene, which once seemed full of possibility, now feels exhausting and futile. She's been on countless dates that went nowhere, had situationships that fizzled, met men who seemed promising until they revealed they were emotionally unavailable, or just looking for something casual, or still hung up on their own exes. She starts to recognize patterns in the men she attracts. Often they're recently divorced too, carrying their own baggage, their own confusion, or they're perpetually single for reasons that become obvious after a few dates. The quality men, the ones who are emotionally mature and genuinely available, they're rare, and they often want women who have their lives together, which she's realizing she doesn't. Not really. This is when the financial reality hits hard too. If she wasn't the primary earner, she's discovering that single life is expensive. The lifestyle she maintained as part of a 2-income household isn't sustainable alone. She's making compromises she didn't anticipate. Smaller apartment, different neighborhood, budget constraints that chip away at the freedom she thought she'd gained. And then there's the loneliness, not the surface level loneliness of being alone on a Saturday night, but the deep existential loneliness of not having a person, not having someone who's building a life with you, who's invested in your well-being, who's there for the mundane moments that make up most of life. She watches her married friends, even the ones in imperfect marriages, and sees something she took for granted. Partnership, someone to split responsibilities with, someone to make decisions with, someone to come home to, the grass that looked so much greener on. The other side is revealing itself to be artificial turf. This is where things get psychologically complex. In phase 3, she can't help but compare her current life to her old one, and here's the cruel trick memory plays. It softens the bad parts and highlights the good parts. She remembers the stability, the shared history, the inside jokes, and the comfortable silences. She forgets or minimizes the reason she left, the arguments, the disconnect, the feeling of being taken for granted or unseen. She looks at her ex's life, and if he's moved on, if he's found someone new, it triggers something primal. Suddenly, the man she couldn't wait to leave is with someone else, and it feels like rejection, like she's been replaced, like maybe she wasn't as irreplaceable as she thought, or if he hasn't moved on, if he's struggling, she might feel guilty. She sees the impact of her choice on someone who, despite everything, was her partner for years, someone who built a life with her, someone who's now rebuilding alone. Either way, the comparison game is torture. She compares her dating experiences to the relationship she had when it was good. She compares her current freedom to the security she once had. She compares her present loneliness to the companionship she took for granted. And slowly, quietly, a thought begins to form. What if I made a mistake? This brings us to phase 4, what I call the settling phase, and it manifests in different ways depending on the person. Some women double down on independence. They convince themselves that partnership isn't necessary, that they're better off alone, that needing someone is a weakness. They build lives around friends, career, hobbies, anything that fills the space where a relationship used to be. It can work, but it often feels like a defense mechanism more than a genuine choice. Others start settling in their dating life. After years of disappointing experiences, they lower their standards. They accept relationships that are good enough, even if they're not fulfilling. They choose companionship over compatibility because being alone has lost its appeal. They end up in relationships that are in some ways worse than the marriage they left. And then there's the third group, the ones who experience genuine regret. They look back at their marriage and realize that what they threw away wasn't perfect, but it was real. It had value, it had potential that maybe they didn't fully explore before pulling the plug. These are the women who reach out, who suggest coffee with their ex just to talk, who float the idea of reconciliation, usually wrapped in language about growth and change and being different people. Now, sometimes it works, often it doesn't, because too much damage has been done, too much time has passed, but the attempt itself reveals the truth. The grass wasn't greener, it was just different grass with its own problems, its own challenges, its own ways of being difficult. Here's the uncomfortable truth that nobody wants to say out loud. Divorce is sometimes necessary, sometimes the healthiest option, sometimes the only way forward, but it's not a solution to unhappiness. It's an exchange of one set of problems for another set of problems. The issues that drove the divorce, the communication problems, the unmet needs, the personal insecurities, they don't disappear when the marriage ends. They follow you into your next relationship. They show up in your dating life. They influence your choices and your patterns. Real growth, the kind that actually changes your life, it doesn't come from changing your circumstances. It comes from changing yourself. And that work is hard, whether you're married or single, partnered or alone. The women who end up truly thriving after divorce aren't the ones who throw themselves into a new life of freedom and excitement. They're the ones who do the difficult internal work, who examine their own contributions to the marriage's failure, who develop genuine self-awareness and emotional maturity, who build a life that's fulfilling, independent of relationship status. But that's rare. Most people, when faced with the discomfort of self-examination, choose distraction instead. They choose the excitement of phase one, the busyness, the validation, the constant motion that prevents them from sitting with their own thoughts. And that's why the pattern repeats so consistently. So why do divorced wives always end up like this? Why does the pattern repeat with such eerie consistency? Because divorce, for all its promise of freedom and new beginnings, doesn't fundamentally change who you are. It changes your circumstances, it removes constraints, it opens up possibilities, but it doesn't heal your wounds or resolve your issues or make you a different person. The journey from euphoria to plateau to reckoning to settling is really a journey of discovering that external changes don't create internal transformation, that running from a problem doesn't solve it, that the work of being a whole, healthy, fulfilled person is the same work whether you're married or single. Some women figure this out and do the work. They emerge from divorce genuinely transformed, not because they left, but because they grew. They become the version of themselves they were seeking all along. But many don't. Many cycle through the phases, end up lonely or in mediocre relationships, and wonder how they got there. They look back at their marriage with a mixture of regret and resignation, realizing too late that what they were running from wasn't their partner, it was themselves. And that's the pattern. That's why divorced wives so often end up in similar places, facing similar struggles, asking similar questions, not because divorce is inherently bad, but because it's inherently incomplete. It's a change of scenery, not a change of self. The real question isn't whether divorce is right or wrong. It's whether you're willing to do the hard work of growth regardless of your relationship status. Because that work, that genuine transformation, That's what actually changes your life. Everything else is just rearranging furniture in the same